You walked into every situation with a heart unguarded, believing that honesty was armor enough, that truth would protect you. You showed up fully, spoke freely, and trusted openly, never questioning the intentions of those around you. But the world does not always mirror your integrity. Some watch quietly, calculating, positioning, waiting for the perfect moment to turn your openness into advantage. And in that silence, in that patience, they find their strength. Today, you will see the stark contrast between a life lived in transparency and a life lived strategically. You will understand why sincerity alone can sometimes feel like vulnerability, and why awareness, boundaries, and quiet wisdom are the true shields that preserve your light without dimming your honesty. The difference between a clean heart and a calculated mind. You entered every relationship, every conversation, every encounter with a heart unguarded, believing that sincerity and honesty were enough to protect you. You believed that truth, when spoken plainly, carried its own weight, and that those who mattered would respond in kind. Your intentions were clear, your words direct, your actions consistent. You moved through life believing that goodness itself would act as a shield, that transparency could build bridges, and that honesty was a currency stronger than any strategy. But there is a reality the heart rarely anticipates. The world does not measure worth in the same way you do. Some people are not looking for connection. Some do not care for the purity of your motives. They are not led by conscience or empathy. They are led by outcomes, by control, by the quiet art of positioning themselves advantageously in every situation. And in this contrast lies the first lesson, the painful, humbling, awakening truth that honesty alone cannot always protect you. You were open, and they were observant. While you spoke freely, they listened not just to hear, but to map, to calculate, to understand where your weaknesses and strengths lay. While you wore your heart on your sleeve, they kept their hands hidden, their minds alert, and their motives cloaked beneath the surface. You moved like water, clear, flowing, unable to hide what lay beneath. They moved like shadows, shaping their form around your light, bending situations to suit their design. And it is not that they were malicious, it is that life has taught them strategy, the way the world works, the way advantage is gained quietly, step by step. When honesty meets strategy, the collision is inevitable, and often it leaves the honest heart feeling exposed, bewildered, and perhaps even betrayed, not because they were wrong, but because you did not anticipate the rules they were playing by. In this space, you learn to see the subtle differences between those who act from a clean heart and those who act from calculated thought. One leads with clarity, the other with intent. One acts to connect, the other acts to position. One assumes fairness is a universal principle, the other assumes outcomes define the measure of everything. This understanding is not meant to harden you or turn you into someone you are not. It is not about abandoning integrity to survive. It is about awareness. The world does not reward virtue blindly, nor does it punish cunning indiscriminately. It simply exists, and within it, people behave according to what they value most. And recognizing this is the first step in learning to navigate life without sacrificing your own principles. Consider how often you have found yourself misunderstood, taken advantage of, or left vulnerable simply because you offered truth where silence would have been safer. You spoke openly about your plans, your dreams, your limitations. You revealed pieces of yourself because you believed that trust was reciprocal, and yet the people who moved strategically saw not vulnerability but opportunity. They saw a map of your mind and heart laid out in plain sight, and they measured it against their own aims. There is no malice in this, only clarity. They act according to the rules of their own reality, just as you act according to yours. The difference lies in awareness. The difference lies in preparation. One cannot survive in their world by living solely in yours. And so the lesson becomes clear. Honesty is never a flaw. It is the purest strength a human can wield, but it must be coupled with discernment. A clean heart does not mean an unguarded heart. A soul that seeks connection must also recognize when strategy is at play, when silence is needed, when observation must precede expression. Awareness is not cynicism, it is preservation. It is the quiet understanding that the world contains both mirrors and shadows, that some will reflect your values and some will bend them. The strength of the honest is measured not in how freely they give, but in how wisely they choose to whom they give. This keynote is the foundation of understanding every interaction you will face in life. It teaches that sincerity alone is not a shield, but a force that must be tempered by perception. It teaches that being open does not make you weak, but being unaware can. It teaches that there is a profound difference between being honest for connection and being honest for exposure. When you see clearly the difference between a clean heart and a calculated mind, you begin to navigate life with a new lens. You begin to preserve your light without dimming it. You begin to honor your truth while understanding that not everyone values truth in the same way. And this awareness, quietly embraced, transforms vulnerability into strength, innocence into wisdom, and honesty into a power that cannot be used against you. In the end, you learn that life does not demand you compromise your integrity. It demands only that you awaken to the reality of others' intentions, that you recognize strategy when it appears, and that you protect the sanctity of your own heart without becoming the mirror of their calculations. A clean heart and a calculated mind may collide, but you do not have to be the casualty. You can be the observer, the learner, the guardian of your own light, and in that understanding, you find not fear, but freedom, a freedom born from clarity, courage, and the unwavering truth of your own honest soul. When transparency becomes a map for others, you believed that honesty was a bridge, a way to connect, a tool to build trust and understanding. You thought that speaking your mind, revealing your intentions, sharing your fears and hopes would create bonds that could withstand the trials of life. You moved openly, offering pieces of your inner world freely, assuming that transparency would be met with respect, reciprocity, and integrity. Yet, there is a hidden law in human interactions that only becomes apparent after the heart has been exposed enough to learn it. Not everyone honors openness the way you do. Some observe it, some study it, some use it as a map, a guide, a compass to navigate around your defenses, to find the paths where they can advance, and to turn your sincerity into leverage. And the revelation hits hard, often when you least expect it. The very thing you thought would protect you, your honesty, can also be the tool through which others gain advantage. You shared your plans because you trusted the people around you. You revealed your weaknesses because you believed that authenticity was strength. You spoke openly about your intentions because secrecy felt like a betrayal of your own principles. And yet, while you were building bridges, they were drawing charts. While you were lighting candles of clarity, they were mapping shadows of opportunity. Transparency in your world was a gift. In theirs, it was information. Every word you spoke freely, every detail you offered without hesitation became a thread that could be traced, understood, and, if necessary, redirected. And this is the bitter truth. Honesty is not always met with honor. When the heart is pure and the mind is strategic, the balance is delicate, and the consequences of misjudging it can leave scars that are invisible but deep. The world rarely punishes people for being honest. The world punishes them for being unaware. You gave freely, assuming that good intent would be respected. But the people around you operated on a different code. They measured, calculated, and weighted. Every nuance of your words was noted. Every hesitation, every confidence, every glimpse of vulnerability became a piece of their puzzle. And you did not see it because you believed that transparency was a shield, not a beacon. You did not realize that sharing too much too soon can expose the patterns of your thinking, the depth of your feelings, the ways in which you can be influenced or anticipated. This is not a lesson in cynicism, it is a lesson in awareness. To live openly does not require deception, but it does require discernment. You do not stop speaking your truth, you learn when, how, and to whom that truth should be given. There is power in silence, but there is also wisdom in timing. You have learned that sometimes revealing too much is like leaving a door open in a storm. The wind does not care for your intentions, it follows the path of least resistance. Similarly, the strategic mind does not act out of malice, it acts out of opportunity. And your openness, your honesty, became an opportunity without you realizing it. You see now that transparency, while noble, can serve as a map for others. It charts the terrain of your mind and heart, showing where you stand, where you hesitate, and where you believe others will never harm you. And once that map exists, it can be used for guidance, for manipulation, or simply to predict your next move. This is not about blame. This is about understanding the dynamics of human behavior and about reclaiming control over the information you offer to the world. The awakening comes quietly but profoundly. You recognize that honesty is a gift to those who deserve it, not a weapon for those who do not. You realize that transparency must be accompanied by wisdom and that trust must be paired with discernment. You learn that sharing the depths of your soul is not reckless if it is measured, intentional, and protected by awareness. You begin to understand that the true strength of honesty lies not in its abundance, but in its precision. When you speak, it carries weight because it is deliberate. When you reveal, it creates connection because it is thoughtful. And when you guard, it is not fear but strategy, strategy to preserve the integrity of your own spirit. In the end, transparency is not wrong. Honesty is not weakness. They are the highest forms of human expression. But the world is composed of both mirrors and maps, of people who reflect your truth and people who chart it. Recognizing the difference is the point at which innocence meets experience, when openness is no longer naive, but empowered. You begin to see that you can remain true to yourself without becoming an open book to those who would turn your pages for their own gain. You learn to offer your honesty selectively, intentionally, wisely. You learn to preserve the purity of your heart while navigating a world that will often measure you by different rules. And so, the lesson of this keynote is clear. Transparency can illuminate, but it can also guide. Honesty is a gift, but it must be delivered with discernment. Awareness does not dilute integrity, it strengthens it. By learning when to speak and when to observe, when to reveal and when to protect, you transform honesty from a potential vulnerability into an invincible force. You remain kind, authentic, and true, but you are no longer exposed. You remain open, but no longer naive. And in that balance, you discover the subtle but powerful distinction between being seen and being mapped, and you reclaim the control that was always yours to begin with. Strategic silence versus honest expression. There is a power in words, and there is a power in silence. You grew up believing that speaking your truth was the ultimate expression of strength, that clarity could resolve conflict, and that honesty would always illuminate the path forward. You believed that if you were clear, sincere, and unwavering, the world would respond with fairness, respect, and understanding. You spoke openly about your thoughts, your feelings, your intentions, expecting that transparency would create trust. And yet, life has a way of teaching its hardest lessons through the unexpected. You have learned, sometimes painfully, that while honesty is a force, silence can be a strategy. There are people who observe more than they speak, who calculate more than they reveal, who wait patiently while the world acts openly around them. And in their quietness, they gain insight, leverage, and understanding that can make even the most sincere heart feel exposed. While you poured your soul into your words, they watched. While you explained your actions, they calculated their next move. While you revealed your intentions, they refined theirs. There is a subtle imbalance in every interaction where one speaks from integrity and the other moves from calculation. Speaking truthfully, without awareness, can unintentionally hand others the map to your mind, the blueprint of your heart. You have likely seen it. The moment when honesty, meant to connect, becomes a tool for someone else's advantage. You see now that the world is not always designed to honor sincerity. It is designed to respond to outcomes, and those who choose silence over words often hold the upper hand. Silence is not absence, and speaking is not always courage. There is a difference between being heard and being understood, between expressing openly and revealing carelessly. The paradox lies in the balance between honesty and awareness. To live fully in truth does not require you to become mute or secretive, but it does demand that you understand the rhythm of human interaction. Words carry weight, and their timing carries even more. You have seen situations where speaking too soon shattered possibilities, where revealing too much too early created vulnerability, and where the absence of observation left you one step behind. In contrast, those who act strategically understand the value of patience. They wait, they watch, they allow others to reveal their thoughts first, to stumble, to expose weaknesses without ever making themselves obvious. And it is not cruelty, it is discipline. It is a quiet mastery of timing and perception, the kind of mastery that transforms information into advantage. Honest expression is not inherently weak, but unchecked honesty can be disarming. It is a double-edged sword. You have felt the sting of conversations where your openness was met with manipulation, where your transparency was mirrored back as leverage, where your trust became a tool rather than a bond. You realize now that integrity does not always protect you from the outcomes of others' calculation. There is no shame in learning this. There is no failure in recognizing that silence, when used strategically, is not deceit but awareness. By observing before speaking, by understanding before revealing, by listening before acting, you gain the ability to navigate the world without compromising your values. This keynote teaches a subtle but profound truth, that the measure of strength is not only in what you express, but in what you choose to withhold. Strategic silence does not diminish honesty, it amplifies it. When you speak after observing, your words carry intention, precision, and power. When you reveal selectively, your truth becomes unassailable. When you hold certain thoughts close, you do not become deceitful, you become discerning. And in that discernment lies freedom. Freedom from being misread, freedom from being used, freedom from the frustration of watching your honesty exploited. Moreover, understanding strategic silence allows you to see human behavior clearly. You notice who acts impulsively and who calculates. You notice who values transparency and who collects information. You notice who communicates to connect and who communicates to control. And this observation is not cynicism, it is intelligence. It is the sharpening of perception that allows you to operate in the world while maintaining the integrity of your own heart. You begin to understand that silence can protect without dishonesty, that timing can preserve without manipulation, and that the careful balance between observation and expression can transform vulnerability into strength. Ultimately, this keynote is about mastery of self in the face of others' strategies. It is about understanding that the world contains both mirrors and shadows, that some will respond to honesty with honesty, and others will respond to honesty with calculation. It is about recognizing that silence is not absence and that expression is not always empowerment. By learning when to speak, when to observe, when to reveal, and when to withhold, you preserve your integrity while navigating the complexity of human interaction. Your honesty remains intact, your voice remains clear, and your heart remains uncorrupted. And in that balance, you achieve a freedom few truly understand. A freedom where your words carry power, your silence carries strength, and your awareness ensures that your light cannot be used against you. The cost of playing fair in an unfair emotional game. You entered life believing in fairness, in balance, in the simple equation that if you acted with honesty, integrity, and loyalty, the world would respond in kind. You believed that if you treated others with respect, honored your promises, and upheld your principles, those around you would mirror the same behavior. You followed invisible rules, unwritten codes of decency that guided your actions, decisions, and relationships. Yet life is rarely measured by fairness alone. Some people operate according to a different set of rules, ones that do not prioritize morality but advantage. While you moved predictably, they moved strategically. While you sought clarity and reciprocity, they sought leverage and outcome. And in this imbalance lies the silent cost of living with a clean conscience in a world that does not always recognize it. You have given more than you received. You have been patient when others were impulsive. You have been loyal when others were calculating. You have acted consistently while watching others bend and shift, adapting to gain what they could without ever considering fairness. And in these moments you may have felt invisible, frustrated, even taken for granted. The world can seem unforgiving when your values are not shared, when your trust is met with calculation, and when your honesty is weighed against strategy instead of empathy. It is a painful realization that playing fair does not guarantee protection. It does not ensure reward. It does not shield you from the cunning or the opportunistic. Fairness in an unfair emotional game can feel like strength misaligned, a virtue that becomes vulnerability in the wrong hands. Yet this is not a lesson in bitterness, it is a lesson in awakening. To live with integrity is never a mistake. To honor your principles is never wrong. But understanding the cost of this approach is essential to survival and growth. You see now that when you act predictably, when you follow the rules you expect everyone else to follow, you give others the ability to anticipate your moves. You reveal patterns of behavior, emotional tendencies and boundaries they may choose to exploit. And while your intentions are noble, the world's response is not guaranteed. Awareness does not diminish goodness, it preserves it. By recognizing the disparity between your values and the strategies of others, you gain the ability to act with integrity while protecting yourself from unnecessary harm. You have likely experienced situations where your fairness was met with manipulation, where your patience was tested, and where your consistency was not rewarded but taken advantage of. You may have wondered why your honesty seemed insufficient, why your loyalty seemed invisible, why your effort seemed unnoticed. The answer is not that you were wrong, but that the game being played around you followed different rules. Life does not punish fairness. Life simply does not reward it universally. Some operate from outcome, some from principle, and these two paths do not always intersect. Recognizing this distinction allows you to navigate relationships and situations with a clearer understanding, without compromising your values, but also without allowing yourself to be used. This keynote teaches the vital skill of balance, the ability to honor your principles while understanding the reality of others' strategies. It is the realization that integrity alone is not a guarantee of protection, but awareness combined with integrity is a shield. You learn to act intentionally, to measure when to give, when to speak, and when to hold back. You learn that kindness does not require naivety, that patience does not demand passivity, and that loyalty does not obligate blind trust. By mastering this balance, you maintain the purity of your heart while navigating a world that often measures success in adaptability rather than virtue. Moreover, this understanding reframes your perspective on fairness itself. Fairness is not always about equality of outcome. Sometimes it is about consistency of action. Sometimes it is about knowing that you have honored your own standards even when others fail to honor theirs. The emotional cost of fairness is not a sign of weakness. It is a reflection of the reality that integrity requires courage, and courage is rarely rewarded immediately. The unspoken truth is that people who act strategically do so not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. The world has taught them through experience that survival often requires adaptation, and this adaptation can appear unfair when contrasted with unwavering honesty. In the end, the lesson of this keynote is both cautionary and empowering. You do not abandon fairness, you do not abandon honesty, you do not abandon loyalty, but you do learn to temper them with awareness, discernment, and boundaries. You learn to recognize the emotional games being played around you without becoming a participant in manipulation. You learn that your strength lies not just in what you give, but in how you protect yourself while giving. You discover that it is possible to remain honorable, authentic, and compassionate, while also navigating the complexities of human behavior with clarity and strategy. By understanding the cost of playing fair in an unfair emotional game, you equip yourself with the insight to live fully without regret. You honor your principles, safeguard your heart, and step forward with a quiet, unshakable confidence that comes from knowing the truth. Integrity is not weakness, honesty is not vulnerability, and fairness is not naive. It is the foundation upon which you build a life that is both principled and resilient, even when the world around you follows different rules. Learning without becoming like them. After all you have seen, after all you have endured, the most important lesson emerges quietly, almost imperceptibly. You can learn from the strategies of others without losing the essence of who you are. You have observed the calculated minds, the patient observers, the ones who measure every word, every gesture, every pause. You have felt the sting of honesty used against you, of trust misused, of openness turned into leverage, and in those moments a choice presents itself, not a loud, dramatic choice, but a subtle one that defines the course of your life. You can either absorb the behaviors you have seen and harden into someone unrecognizable, or you can take the wisdom behind them, adapt it, and retain the integrity of your own soul. This keynote is about the second path, the one that requires courage, awareness, and discernment. It is about evolving without losing the very essence that makes you honest, genuine, and human. You have learned the rules of engagement, the unspoken currents of human behavior, and the quiet advantages that come with patience, observation, and strategy. Yet the lesson is not to mimic these behaviors blindly. To become strategic does not mean abandoning your principles. It does not mean turning your heart into a fortress of suspicion, nor does it mean replacing empathy with calculation. Strategy, when divorced from morality, becomes cold and hollow. The real challenge and the true mastery is to integrate awareness with authenticity, to recognize when silence is stronger than speech, when restraint is wiser than reaction, when careful observation is more powerful than immediate judgment. This is the alchemy of experience, the ability to navigate the world's complexities without letting the world corrupt your core. In this process, boundaries become essential. You realize that honesty is a gift, but it is not a license for exposure. Your empathy is a strength, but it does not obligate you to absorb every manipulation or tolerate every strategy used against you. You understand that wisdom is the ability to discern who deserves access to your truth and who does not. This does not make you less kind, less generous, or less authentic. On the contrary, it preserves your ability to give fully, to trust deeply, and to act courageously, because you no longer place your energy where it can be weaponized. Learning without becoming like them is not a retreat, it is a conscious evolution. It is the quiet mastery of protecting your light while continuing to shine. You may have felt anger, frustration, or disappointment at the ways others used calculation to their advantage. You may have questioned your own judgment, wondering why honesty and goodwill were not enough to safeguard you. And yet, in the midst of these challenges, a profound clarity emerges. Your experiences are not lessons in bitterness. They are lessons in discernment. You learn to recognize patterns, to read intentions, and to act with foresight. You begin to understand that the power of integrity is amplified when paired with awareness, that trust is more meaningful when given intentionally, and that your light shines brighter when you protect it from shadows without dimming its warmth. This keynote also addresses the subtle art of adaptation. You see now that growth does not require imitation, nor does it demand compromise. You can adopt strategies for self-preservation without sacrificing honesty. You can observe, analyze, and respond with intelligence while remaining morally grounded. You can act with intention without becoming manipulative, choose timing without becoming calculating, and practice patience without becoming indifferent. Learning without becoming like them is not about survival alone, it is about transformation. It is the conscious choice to navigate life with the wisdom of experience while keeping your soul untainted. Moreover, this keynote emphasizes resilience. You realize that the world is neither entirely fair nor entirely dishonest. Some will act strategically, some will act sincerely, and some will exist somewhere between the two. Your growth lies in understanding these nuances and responding without losing yourself. You learn that strength is not in mirroring the tactics of others, but in mastering your own behavior. You cultivate an inner balance where integrity meets prudence, where openness meets discernment, and where kindness meets protection. This balance allows you to move through life with confidence, clarity, and a sense of self that cannot be undermined by the strategies of others. In the end, the essence of this keynote is empowerment. You retain your honesty, your compassion, and your authenticity, but you no longer allow these qualities to be exploited. You take what you have learned from observing the strategic minds of the world and apply it to protect your heart, strengthen your choices, and guide your actions. You evolve, not into someone you do not recognize, but into someone wiser, more resilient, and more capable of thriving in a complex world. You learn without losing yourself. You grow without abandoning your principles. You navigate without compromising your integrity. And in that conscious evolution, you discover the true power of being honest in a world that is often strategic, and the quiet triumph of remaining yourself while mastering the lessons the world has to teach.